Hi, it's KCCK's Culture Crawl. I'm Dennis Green, and my guest today is filmmaker Kristian Day, a Cedar Rapids native now living in Des Moines. And Kristian, you are on the Culture Crawl in the early days, around 2006 or 2007, I think.
Yeah, well, I think we were on when I was promoting Templeton Rye, which might have actually been like 2011. But before that,
Okay.
uh, KCCK was the first radio station to ever play music that I composed back in 2004. Long time ago. There used to be a show. I don't know if it's still on, but it was very similar to. It was kind of like a new age kind of experimental, but like if you're into like Brian Eno, I don't
Right.
know what it
Night
was called. I
Breeze.
can't
Night
remember.
Breeze. Yeah,
Night
we had that
Breeze,
show for a long
yes.
time. Yeah.
Night Breeze, yes. That show played a song called Protozoa Drops that I recorded when I was like 17. And so the relationship's been going on for quite a while.
Well, it's great. It's great to have you back after all these years, and you've just released a brand new documentary called "The Last American Gay Bar." You sent me a screener, and I told you, I said, "Well, time is short, but I'll try at least get a couple, three episodes watched." And I sat down yesterday and I watched the entire six episodes. So we'll try to avoid spoilers, but it's a documentary that really draws you in. So first off, congrats on bringing the project home.
Thank you. It was definitely a labor of love, something I've been talking about for years. And in fact, the origins go back to my barber. I had written a story about these couple old gay bars called the PNS Lounge and Blue Goose. And my barber, who used to drive a taxi back in 72, was telling me stories about that. And he's like, oh, you'd see all these people coming around. And this is before, we even knew much. People were in the closet back then, but we knew everyone. We knew that there was a gay community, but everyone just kind of kept to themselves. And I'm a big fan of history, obviously, with doing documentaries and working in that world. I'm a big fan of any type of subculture, counterculture, anything that's off the beaten path. I loved watching the films on Harvey Milk. There just came out a new documentary called Gay USA, which is about Stonewall and a bunch of other stuff that was going on in San Francisco at that time. And I always wondered what was going on in Des Moines. And a lot of that history really wasn't documented. I mean, I really had to dig and ask some of these old timers that, they're in their Vietnam vets, they're in their 80s now, and also trying to find people who were still cognizant to tell these stories. Um, and I felt like I uncovered this world that a lot of us either didn't know about or have forgotten. And it was honestly a real treat to just sit there with everyone and hear them tell me their stories.
The frame, for want of a better term, is the Blazing Saddle, which is a bar that's still in existence, still in the East Village. I walked past it a couple of months ago, in fact. So it's still there, but it's been in that spot for what, close to 40 years, right?
40 years. Yeah, they just celebrated 40 years last year. It's the oldest gay bar in Iowa. We've had a lot over the last several decades. Des Moines only really sustained three or four at a time. But that's actually pretty big for Iowa. I mean, if you think about Cedar Rapids, I think still has one basics. There used to be one up in Cedar Falls called King and Queens. The Quad Cities, there was JR's. Uh, so the fact that that Blazing Saddles has stood the test of time and is really something. I mean, we just found out that right now we have three. We have Blazing Saddle, we have the Garden, and we have Buddy's Corral. Buddy's is going to be closing in August, and now we're going to be down to two. Uh, so I mean, it is really something that they can sustain. I think a lot of that has really shifted in the last couple of years with like dating apps. You used to go to a gay bar to cruise and meet someone that is similar to you, and now you don't necessarily need to. You can meet anywhere, and that unfortunately has hurt the gay bar world. There's still a need for like people going to drag shows and things like that, but and the saddle is that on a Friday, Saturday night, but during the week, it's still like you know, it's now more of a universal bar, but it is a man's bar. They all come and they hang out after work, have happy hour, cocktails. It's not flashy. It's very masculine inside, but it's like it looks kind of like a dive bar. And those type of establishments we're starting to see, especially COVID kind of, put the nail in the coffin for many of them, especially in Chicago and Kansas City. Um, that was it. They just said, you know what, this is our time. It's just been the same owners for all these years, and a lot of them are at retirement age.
As I said, the Blazing Saddle is kind of the framing uh, theme where for the documentary, and I went into it thinking I was going to learn a lot about the history of this bar. And so it ended up being just a little bit of a misnomer, because really what you did was you used the the people and the community that came together in the Blazing Saddle and were, a part of, I'll call it the original gay scene in Des Moines, although as we know it goes back way farther than 40 years, to tell the story of primarily gay men throughout the last 50 years of history, from being gay in the military in Vietnam back in the 60s and 70s, up through Stonewall and AIDS and Don't Ask, Don't Tell and the legalization of gay marriage, and now in our current environment, taking a lot of steps backwards in terms of and so it was, I really loved how it told the story of all those historical events that those of us of a certain age certainly remember, but did it through the eyes of these men in Des Moines.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a bait and switch, but I think the audience can appreciate it. I mean, even the title was kind of a I could say it's almost like a scam to some people. They're like, well, there's more gay bars, and this isn't the last one. And then it's true, it's not the last one, but there are, but it's more of it's more of an identity that is being lost. And yes, I did use the bar as a vehicle to tell the stories of these men. And I found like the stories of Vietnam very interesting. And I tried to walk a line because I didn't, as much of a left-leaning bleeding heart liberal as I am, I didn't want it to come off as liberal propaganda. And I wanted to show that these men who were in Vietnam are very patriotic. I mean, Bob Mongo, who is like the star of this whole thing, American flag shirt, Vietnam vet hat, very, very patriotic. I mean, if you go into that bar, there are all those donation boxes for the VA hospital and Veterans Affairs in there. They're very pro-military. They have a great relationship with the police. Um, and that was something I really wanted to show. And also, when we talk about the civil rights, the moment we start talking at it from a standpoint of left or right, if you just talk about civil rights and the rights of humanity, I everyone can starts to kind of get on the same page. I've had several deep conversations with folks from different parts of the state, such as Waterloo, and and I hear a lot of the very they immediately will get on to the book stuff. Like, well, I don't want my kids to hear about this, or I don't want to hear about that. And you back it up for a second, and you're just like, no, wait a sec, wait. Let's talk about the real issues that you're having, and let's like break it down and take away, let's take away the D's and the R's from the conversation, and we all kind of start to meet a little more in the liberal. Not everyone, but you get more. The message becomes clear. That's why even in the last episode, which I don't want to spoil because episode 2 literally comes out today, so I don't want to spoil it. But episode
Right.
6, we
Exactly.
we return to the military side of it, and also in regard, it also talks about trans rights that was happening, and it's happening now, to another individual who is. He's a trans man, but he's also extremely patriotic and will fight for his country and will fight for his community. Um, and I think that's the best way to really tell that. If you just talk about history of a bar, you're just like it's more like a branded content commercial thing. And I think you need to know why this place is important and the people who made it. That's where the stories really become really important.
Well, and I hope it's not too much of a spoiler to talk about really what you've done, and by calling it the last American gay bar, is you've kind of put forth a thesis that as we mentioned dating apps, and as uh, queer culture has become more accepted, then then the gay bars that were the original places where people could find their community are maybe becoming less important. So, what do you think? Now, having gone through this, is it less important or is it more important?
I mean, I think it's more important to capture to remember these things. We're always, if we don't study history, if we don't embrace history and embrace these stories, we're always doomed to repeat it, and we have repeated it. And we're starting, I mean, we're seeing it right now. I mean, I don't see much difference between what's going on with the struggles for trans people any different than what the gay community dealt with in the 80s and the 90s. And I say that 80s and 90s and not necessarily the 70s because I feel like politics really started to get hold of the whole thing in the 80s and the 90s versus the 70s. And I know some people might argue with me about that, but if you notice in the film or in the series, they talk about there was lots of gay folks in the military. No one made a big deal about it. It was not a big deal. It really didn't become a big deal until all of a sudden Don't Ask, Don't Tell shows up. And now it's a big thing. Everyone kind of lived side by side and everyone was doing their thing. And because they were in the closet, they had their own world, their own playground. And I feel like and a lot of these old guys would tell me that sometimes they wish it was that time because there was more freedom for them. There was no microscope on them as it eventually, became with politics and stuff. Now, that is not saying that they disagree with all the rights they have. They are super, they all are, like one Stinky once told me, um, the same year gay marriage passed was the same year I wasn't able to smoke cigarettes in the bar anymore. And he's like, so I guess, and he's like, I guess we'll trade that out. Um, and the other thing too is a lot of these guys we talk about like the marriage act. Uh, a lot of these older guys had in their minds accepted that they were not going to ever be married and everything was going to be temporary. So a lot of them had a big struggle with accept with like, oh, so we can get married. I mean, that's cool. Not probably not for me. Um, and that was a very interesting conversation because some of them, they were indifferent about it. But then some of them, like Beasley and Greg, who were in the show, get married. And that's a big heartwarming moment for in the series when those two get married. Uh, I it just the whole thing felt like I mean I felt like I got in at the right time. I know in past projects I run into this struggle with people dying before I can sit down with them because I always pick these stories that are just like on the cuffs of like that generation is moving out, and I feel so grateful that I was able to sit down with a lot of these guys. Gary Moore, who he was in the show. He talks about being diagnosed with AIDS in 1986. He is still around today, still flourishing, still, he's kind of a gay elder in the community. He helps run the Prime Timers, which is a senior group of gay and bisexual men who are single. And they get together and have potlucks, go to movies, because at that age group, a lot of them who wish they could have a partner and they don't, there's a lot of high suicide rates from loneliness. So the organizations here have really, I'm so impressed with them and what they're doing for this community, especially that older generation. The younger generation, I they got it. They got a lot of stuff going. I mean, they're leaders, they're politicians, they're all these things. And I mean, I think we're very thankful to be living in the world that we're living in right now. Um, versus, you go back 20 years, 30 years. So, this was a project that I mean, every time I talk about it, I get real excited. And I mean, we run for 6 more weeks, but after the 6 weeks of the broadcast, we're going to start doing some lecture and college like tours with it because I feel like a lot of the LGBTQ clubs and groups need to hear some of these stories and possibly bring these guys on the tour with us like we did. We did a screening here at the Varsity in Des Moines, and we had a lot of our main cast, so like Greg, Gary, and Bob, and Rick, and John. Did a Q&A session talking about more in depth of some of the things we talked about in the show. So I feel like this series will have a long life and will continue to resonate with people for years to come.
You really feel like you get to know, Bob and Gary and all, by the end of it, you really feel like you've gotten to know them and, feel like they're your friends. So the documentary does a great job of, making those human connections. Okay. So you said that the second episode just dropped. How do we watch it?
So every Wednesday, Out TV. If you don't have Out TV, Amazon, Roku, Apple. It's all on their premium stuff. I know Out TV on their YouTube channel did drop the whole first episode last week. So if you just want to take a preview of the first episode, and the first episode, as you probably will agree, because it sucked you in, is a banger of an episode.
Totally did. Sucked me in
So
from the very first minute.
So I mean, if you're curious, you can go on YouTube. You can watch the first episode for free, and then you can subscribe on Amazon and Roku and Apple. I don't know how much it actually costs, but I mean, it's like typically probably any other show that's on there. So I highly recommend it. If you're in Des Moines, we are doing watch parties every Wednesday, 9 p.m. at the Saddle, which is where I will be this evening. Talking with people. And I think this, unfortunately, might be the only one I'll be able to go to because my schedule is starting to get a little busy. But I highly recommend if you can watch it with a group, that's the best way to watch it. Watching it in the theater with everyone, the first three episodes last month was one of the best experiences because you hear everyone laugh and cry throughout, those first three episodes. And there's a lot of those moments. So, yeah. And I think everyone at home will enjoy it too.
Kristian Day is the producer of the documentary "The Last American Gay Bar," which is out now on Out TV and also the various streaming services as well. Kristian, is there a website or a place online where people can go to find out more about this and about your projects?
You can go to outtv.com. You can find me at christianday.com, spelled with a K. And then you can find me on the Instagrams. That's the only social media I'm on anymore, and I'm hanging on by a thread. I just want to be done with it. Uh, um, but I also encourage anyone if they ever want to reach out to me directly, just my email is just christianday@gmail.com. I will answer any email if they have questions about anything. I'm easy to reach. So yeah, feel free.
Kristian, it's great to talk to you. As I said, I love this project and really enjoyed watching it and be interested and excited to see the remaining episodes drop and the reception that it gets. And thanks for taking the time to be with me today. And keep in touch. Yeah, whenever you've got a new project, let's talk about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dennis.
Great. Thanks very much. You can hear the Culture Crawl live on the radio many weekdays at 10:30 or download the podcast, watch or listen on your own schedule at kcck.org/culture or even using your favorite podcast app. You can watch our videos on the KCCK channels on Facebook or YouTube. Our producer is Lydia Kilgore. I'm Dennis Green. I'll talk to you later.